Before the subcommittee comes to order, I want a little personal privilege to announce that John Culberson just came back from orientation of his daughter going to the University of Texas. He's got one daughter. She's beautiful, intelligent, and smart, and he's having a slow heart attack worrying about sending her to the University of Texas. But she's going to a great school, and he's already worried about the boys lined up out there. So Mr. Culberson is under a lot of stress today. But I'm very proud of his pick of one of my schools that I graduated from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we're going to get started today. The subcommittee will come to order. The threats to our country continue to grow. It's not easy. We see this daily. Federal computer systems are hacked. Floods and other natural disasters confront local communities. The President's open border policy emboldens smugglers, traffickers, and illegal immigrants. The freedoms we cherish are exploited by homegrown terrorists and violent extremists. For those reasons, the Department of Homeland Security's mission are more critical now than ever, and it is why it is imperative that we pass this bill. Working with my colleagues and the ranking member, Ms. Roble Allard, I believe we are presenting legislation that strengthens the security of our homeland, addresses areas where reform is needed, and cuts inefficiencies within the agencies. Thank you all for your hard work, time, and effort in this important legislation. Like every subcommittee, we received a challenging 302B allocation. After a thorough scrubbing of the numbers, however, this recommendation ensures both national security and fiscal restraint. I'd like to highlight a few of the examples of what this bill includes. For the Coast Guard, the recommendation adds more than $360 million above the President's request, an amount which restores the critical enlistment and extension bonuses which were cut in the President's request, enables the Coast Guard to award a contract for the offshore patrol cutter to replace the 50-year-old medium endurance cutters, enhances long-range surveillance capabilities with an additional fully missionized C-130J, maintains the current fast response cutter acquisition schedule, renovates crumbling military housing, and increases operational effectiveness for more depot-level maintenance of vessels, aircraft, and infrastructure. At FEMA, cuts to state and local programs and firefighter assistance grants are restored to the FY15 levels of $1.5 billion and $680 million respectively, which is $299 million above the request. Disaster Relief Fund for projected major disasters known requirements is fully funded at $7.4 billion. For CBP, the mark includes funds for 21,370 Border Patrol agents and 23,775 CBP officers. Surveillance tools to increase situational awareness and improve border security. Additional sensors, aircraft spares, and multi-role aircraft, non-intrusive inspection equipment to replace outdated legacy systems. For the Secret Service, the recommendation ensures the capacity to hire additional Secret Service agents and officers, addresses training gaps, and improves perimeter security at the White House. The Department's cybersecurity programs are fully funded to counter cyber threats and protect civilian government networks from cyber attacks. The recommendation enables ICE to sustain and improve all aspects of enforcement, investigative, and detention operations by fully funding 34,040 detention beds for individuals and families who enter the United States illegally. The HERO Child Rescue Corps, a program that trains returning military veterans to catch interim child pornography rings. The Visa Security Program, ensuring that every visa application is screened against terrorist watch lists. And additional attorneys to increase the number of immigration hearings held by the DOJ immigration judge teams. Finally, the E-Verify system, which enables businesses to check their employees that their employees are eligible for work in the United States, is fully funded. We achieve these funding priorities by making thoughtful and appropriate cuts, which I'd like to explain. Over the last few years, many of DHS's components have failed to achieve their respective hiring goals. In several components, attrition exceeds the department's ability to hire people. Not only does this pose a problem pose a national security and public safety concerns, it has serious budgetary implications. In short, it means funding appropriated for personnel has been misspent, and Congress has been denied the level of oversight the taxpayers demand. This bill contains several provisions to rein in this practice. For example, despite FY15 staffing levels that are far below expectations, the FY16 request proposed major increases in staff. The bill before you takes this excess funding, which is approximately $505 million, and applies it to programs that protect our homeland. It also directs the department to conduct an analysis to identify the root causes of the high attrition rate and slow hiring processes. Let's be clear. This bill fully funds our frontline law enforcement staffing, including 21,370 Border Patrol agents, 23,775 CBP officers. It also eliminates the wasteful slush funds that DHS has been using for unbudgeted and unreported activities. Another area where the recommendation insists on fiscal discipline is the oversight of FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund. It has become common practice for FEMA to carry over billions of dollars in disaster relief fund from year to year. Like clockwork, every year the President's request includes full funding for projected upcoming disaster relief fund needs, and Congress supports it without taking into consideration the carryover balance. There's no good or prudent reason to continue this practice, especially when resources are limited. Therefore, the recommendation provides full funding for FEMA's FY16 DRF needs as projected in the budget request, but rescinds $1.26 billion of prior year's unobligated balances. Now, don't worry, there will be sufficient funds for declared disasters in the future. Even with this rescission, FEMA expects to end the year with a balance in the DRF of $1.3 billion. So there is more than sufficient contingency fund available in the case of an emergency. Finally, I want to address some of the oversight matters that are included in the bill and report. DHS is a relatively young cabinet level department. For years, it has reacted to the crisis rather than preparing for them. Fortunately, that dynamic is beginning to change, but additional tasks remain. As noted many times by this subcommittee, proper oversight of DHS's multi-billion-dollar investment portfolio is essential. DHS owes us useful, accurate, up-to-date information about procurement to ensure that components are accountable for cost, schedule, and performance. Similarly, DHS's financial management processes are weak. With over 70 different appropriations and more than 100 programs, DHS functions with significant budget disparities and inconsistencies. I am absolutely certain the current budget structure is a contributing factor to the rampant under-execution of personnel costs. We have to change this paradigm. For this reason, the bill mandates for FY17 budget requests be presented to Congress in a new format that uses a common appropriation structure for every DHS component. Implementing this type of financial management tool is a strategic imperative with which DHS agrees. Additionally, oversight ranges from withholding funds for carelessly failing to comply with repeated subcommittee requests for information, a practice that is totally unacceptable, to statutory requirements for detention beds. With regard to detention beds, following last year's unprecedented spike in the number of families crossing the border illegally, the lack of sufficient and appropriate family detention space, the FY15 bill includes funds for more than 2,700 family beds. This increase in detention capacity means that more families are being removed almost immediately after they arrive illegally into the United States. Finally, this bill provides no discretionary or mandatory funds to implement the President's executive actions on immigration. It goes one step further by including two provisions that make sure DHS does not take any steps to implement these actions under the court's imposed injunction. Let me address several problems I find very troubling. In the last few years, more and more jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies have made the decision not to honor ICE detainers. Though I respect the rights of every state and municipality to enact laws that govern their respective jurisdictions, refusing to honor ICE detainer is extremely risky when dangerous illegal aliens are released into the community. In addition, the decision creates a burden on ICE, which must locate the fugitives, and it endangers the lives of immigration officers who have to apprehend the fugitives. I likewise would be remiss if I didn't find it absolutely intolerable when the Secret Service agents and other law enforcement personnel act irresponsibly on the job. It is completely unacceptable that the Transportation Security Administration and other components don't respond seriously to the Inspector General's reports and recommendations about the safety of the nation's airports. Consequently, the bill includes multiple provisions that enables Congress to monitor these problems and put DHS in a better position to anticipate them. In closing, let there be no mistake. This committee believes DHS is critical to national security, public safety, and a strong United States economy. And we appreciate the hard work and dedication of thousands of agents, officers, Coast Guard military personnel, watchstanders, and mission support staff who make it their business every day to keep this nation safe. For all these reasons, I urge you to support the measure, and I look forward to working with you as we move this bill through the legislative process. I'm happy to answer any questions about the mark, but before I do, I'd like to recognize our ranking member, Ms. Roble-Allard, and then our full committee chairman and ranking member, Ms. Lowy, for comments they would like to make. Ms. Roble-Allard.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the extent to which you and your staff have included me and my staff in the development of your mark. You fully considered our comments, our suggestions, and proposals, and accommodated us whenever you could. We also worked together to reach compromise whenever possible, and I very much appreciate that. Well, we did not reach consensus we did reach consensus on many issues. There are things on which we still disagree, and I hope that as the legislative process moves forward, we can continue to work on these differences and hopefully craft a bill that the President will sign. One of my concerns is that with the end of the fiscal year fast approaching and few legislative days remaining, if a new budget agreement isn't reached soon, we will face a very predictable crisis in September. We all know that now, rather than later, we should be working towards a new budget agreement. Having said that, considering the budget that you were given, I want to reiterate my compliments to you on most of the choices made in developing this bill. The allocation you started with is $2 billion below the President's request and $337 million below the current level. This means certain high-priority activities are not adequately funded. For example, with a higher allocation, the bill could provide the full request for pre-disaster mitigation grants, which help reduce the impact of future disasters, and it could provide the full request for flood mapping, which is critical for ensuring communities can plan development in ways that minimize flood risks. These are common sense programs that merit additional federal investment. Another example of the impact of an inadequate allocation is the failure of the bill to provide the requested funding level for the new DHS headquarters already under construction on the St. Elizabeth campus in Southeast D.C. Earlier this year, the department revised its plan for St. Elizabeth to consolidate its footprint and reduce costs. It makes no sense to build half the headquarters, and further days will only cost us more in the long run. Another issue is the continuation of a provision setting an arbitrary minimum 34,000 available ICE detention beds. This limits ICE's flexibility in managing its enforcement and removal resources in response to changing circumstances. It also limits ICE's flexibility to use cheaper alternative forms of supervision when appropriate. ICE detention is not intended to be punitive. It is a civil detention for the purpose of ensuring attendance at immigration court hearings and potentially removal for those determined to be flight risks or a danger to public safety. Perhaps the most significant area of disagreement in the bill is the funding for the continued use of family detention. I have personally seen ICE's two largest family detention facilities and have talked to the women and children incarcerated there. Facilities like those at Kearns and Dilley are simply not appropriate places for families. These women and children are not flight risks or dangers to our community. Most have come here intentionally to submit an application for asylum in accordance with our immigration laws. Instead of detention, we should use less costly, non-detention forms of supervision, such as the ATD program or release on bond or parole. I am pleased the report prioritizes ICE's planned Family ATD initiative. This will help families navigate the immigration court process and link them to support services. To ensure the success of this program, it is critical for ICE to select qualified service providers who have the proper training and disposition to support these families. The bill also includes new general provisions I believe to be unnecessary. One would prohibit Citizenship and Immigration Services from implementing the DAPA and expanded DACA programs while the federal court injunction remains in place. Since CIS has no intention of violating the injunction, the need for this provision is unclear. Another provision in the bill is one we have seen added to other bills this year. It would have the effect of reversing the President's modest loosening of the trade embargo with Cuba. This means travelers returning to the United States from Cuba could no longer bring back up to $400 worth of merchandise for personal use. This is an issue for the authorizing committee and has no place in our bill. More importantly, these provisions make our job harder by unnecessarily complicating the already difficult path facing our appropriations process this year. These areas of disagreement are very important, but notably, they are relatively few. On most aspects of the bill and report, there is bipartisan agreement. The mark before us maintains the current funding levels for the first responder and anti-terrorism grants, emergency management grants, firefighter grants, and grants for the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, all of which are vitally important and share broad bipartisan support. The bill also increases funding for critical Coast Guard acquisitions to recapitalize aging assets, maintains funding for the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberty, fully funds the proposed increase for the Secret Service to begin addressing the Protective Mission Panel recommendations, provides additional funding for ICE investigations into child exploitation, human trafficking, financial crimes and drug smuggling, and it restores funding to maintain the current number of university centers of excellence. I particularly commend the Chair on his continued efforts in the bill and report to push the Department to develop and institutionalize more rigorous, consistent, and comprehensive processes for planning, budgeting, acquisition, evaluation, joint requirements, and operational coordination. Secretary Johnson has been our partner in pushing the department to mature, and he needs the support and direction contained in the Chairman's mark to do it. It is my hope we can reach a point in the process where bipartisan agreement extends to the whole bill based on an allocation that is sufficient to address all the department's requirements. In the meantime, I again underscore my appreciation for the efforts of the Chairman and his excellent staff to work with the minority throughout the bill drafting process.
Thank you, Ms. Roble-Allard. Now I'm happy to yield to the distinguished chairman of the full committee, Mr. Hal Rogers of Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you and Ranking Member Ms. Roble-Allard for cooperating and working together, put together, I think, a good bill. And that's coming from the original chairman of this subcommittee. You've done a good job. I'm keeping a close eye.
I understand.
This is the 12th of the 12 bills we're marking up in the subcommittee. As you know, we have on the floor of the House the 7th of the 12 today, hopefully to finish today. And next week, if all goes well, we'll have another, an 8th bill on the floor of the financial services. So, I want to thank you and the members of this subcommittee for this hard work in bringing this bill before us. We look forward to working with all of you to see this bill through to the finish line. $39.33 billion. You're emphasizing fiscal discipline, as you should, and oversight, and prioritizing critical national security and anti-terrorism programs, the enforcement of our immigration laws, preparedness for any national natural disaster and the like. I'm pleased to see that the subcommittee has maintained our strong commitment to Coast Guard by providing a $360 million increase over what the President requested. That will fund critical modernization of aircraft and vessels and better enable our servicemen and women to carry out critical patrol and counter-narcotics missions. The bill also takes important strides to secure the nation's borders, big funding boost for Border Patrol agents, border security technology, upgrades at the CPB Air and Marine Operations Center, all of which will help improve surveillance. And in addition to those critical physical security measures, the bill also provides much-needed investments in cybersecurity and disaster preparedness. $2.5 billion for first responder grants to help provide our men and women on the front lines with the proper training and equipment that they need. Finally, the subcommittee has also included numerous oversight and reporting requirements that will ensure that DHS is following congressional directives, spending wisely, and providing strong enforcement of our laws. And speaking of strong enforcement, the bill makes doubly sure that immigration laws are being followed and enforced by DHS. For example, the bill contains no funding to implement the President's unconstitutional executive action on immigration and prohibits funding for any activities under this action while legal challenges are ongoing. No doubt this was a tough balancing act in writing the bill, Mr. Chairman. but I'm pleased that it provides the resources to help keep our nation's borders, coastlines, and airways safe, and provides our first responders with the tools and assistance to ensure an effective local response to unforeseeable disasters and other emergency situations. It's a good bill. I urge the subcommittee to promptly report it to the full committee. I thank the chairman and ranking member, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I'm happy to yield to the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Lowy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before we get to the bill at hand, I would like to take a moment to address the shameful episode that occurred on the House floor last night. On Tuesday, the House approved by voice vote and without opposition 3 Democratic amendments prohibiting the sale and display of the Confederate battle flag at a national parks or National Park Service administered cemeteries. Last night, after nearly 20 hours of debate, the chairman of the Interior and Environment Subcommittee attempted to sneak a final amendment into the bill, reversing the action of the House to pass these amendments and thereby protect the sale and display of the Confederate battle flag on federal grounds. Mr. Chairman, I've been a member of this committee for more than 20 years, a member of the Congress for nearly 30. And that was one of the most shameful episodes I have ever seen. There is an emerging national consensus that for many, the Confederate battle flag is a hurtful and intolerant symbol, and government should not countenance its display. This morning, South Carolina legislators came to exactly that conclusion. It is truly unbelievable that Republican leadership and this committee would come to a different conclusion. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will reject this disgraceful action. Turning to today's bill, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Ranking Member Roy Bell Allard on her first Homeland Security markup. I'd also like to thank Chairman Rogers, Subcommittee Chairman Carter, as well as the hardworking committee staff. This is the 12th and final bill we will consider, and despite the fact that the President proposed to end sequestration through more reasonable and realistic budgeting 5 months ago, Republicans have yet to propose a workable solution. With only 23 more legislative days until the end of the fiscal year, it is really time. Let's start working to avoid another pointless and damaging government shutdown. Refusing to adopt a sufficient overall allocation for discretionary investments has led to a bill that at $2 billion below the administration's request and $337 million below the FY 2015 enacted level would severely underfund too many priorities at the expense of hardworking Americans' safety. Floods are the most common natural disaster in the U.S. and are very costly, with the average individual flood claim from the National Flood Insurance Program amounting to nearly $42,000 and total annual claims averaging more than $3.5 billion. Yet the bill would slash FEMA flood mapping by $178.6 below the request. The more we invest in mitigation, the more we save when disasters inevitably strike. The administration requested $200 million for pre-disaster mitigation grants, which would fund projects that could avoid $600 million in future losses. However, the initiative would be funded at a paltry $25 million in the mark, 88% less than what was requested. Additionally, the chairman's mark would cut alternatives to detention by $12.7 million and the Federal Air Marshal Service by $5.2 million below the requested levels. Despite these shortcomings, I do want to thank the chairman for supporting several of my long-standing priorities. While I hope they will be increased under a better allocation, The bill would provide $2.53 billion for FEMA grants and training, including $600 million for UASI, including $13 million for nonprofit security grants, $680 million for firefighter grants, including $340 million for equipment grants, and $340 million for safer staffing grants, $350 million for emergency management performance grants. In closing, let me reiterate my appreciation for the chairman and ranking members' efforts. Democrats are truly eager to support bills that include adequate spending levels and are free from poison pill riders. I hope that as we move forward, the agencies tasked with vital security functions receive the resources they need to keep our communities safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Are there any other members of this subcommittee that wish to be heard on this bill before us today? I would like to acknowledge Mr. Price, the former chairman and ranking member of this subcommittee. His wisdom on these matters is always good for both sides of the aisle here. Thank you for being here. I need to remind the members that rules require that copies of the bill and the report remain in the room at the conclusion of today's markup. Are there any amendments to the bill at this time? All right, hearing none, I believe that at this time Mr. Culberson is prepared to offer a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill be reported favorably to the full committee.
Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second.
All right, this bill, all those in favor of this motion? Announce aye. All right, the motion is adopted. I want to thank all of y'all for being here and being part of this. This brings the markup to a close. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be able to make technically conforming edits as we prepare the bill and report the full committees for circulation. I anticipate amendments at full committee, and if you have an amendment, please let me know or the staff know about it as soon as possible. Once again, thanks to Ms. Rubel-Allard. It's really been a joy to work with her in this bill.
Crazy.
And she's been very helpful in working with me on this mark. Thank you to each subcommittee member and to all the staff, and I look forward to working with you as we move forward. There being nothing further, this subcommittee is adjourned.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Chairman.